is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me, day and night. I loved the old man. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it.
Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever.
Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. Every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient enough for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon that vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night just at midnight, but I found the eye always closed. And so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. On the 8th night, I was more cautious than usual in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening. And the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out.
Who's there?
Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of a soul when overcharged with awe. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with all these superstitions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and full upon the vultured eye, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot.
And so you see that this is not madness, but an overacuteness of the senses. Suddenly, another bold, dull, quick sound filled my head. It was the beating of the old man's heart.
I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room.
Ah!
I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Sounded the hour. There came a knocking at the street door. There entered the men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. The shriek I said was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease, but ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently, and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh, God! What could I do? I foamed. I raved. I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God! No, no! They heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder!
Enough! This is not